I want to make this about you today. I've had lots of questions on the stands over the years, so I've tried to incorporate that into typical questions I get asked and some advice that I can provide today. So I'll talk a bit about who we are, what we do, and most importantly, how you can work with us. I think it's key to understand when the business opportunities are available, how you can increase your business reach, and also some of the fantastic support that's available. So Supplier Development Program, do some great training, some great workshops today. I'll make reference to a number of the tools and the sites that I think every speaker will emphasise, like Public Contracts Scotland as a way of finding out those opportunities. So who we are. So we're a centre of procurement expertise, and in the earlier presentations we saw how different parts of the public sector have different centres of expertise. So we're a centre for the local authorities. So our predominant work is for the 32 local authorities across Scotland, and also the associated members, things like housing associations and leisure associations. They all work together with us to identify opportunities that we can then procure on their behalf. My role as a project and account manager, I sit between the local authorities, the associate members, the suppliers, and our own organisation to just really communicate what's available, talk to our local authorities, find out what they want us to do. We work on their behalf. We're a local government agency ourselves. And I've been in this role about 3 years, and I really enjoy the transparent and open process that we have. So we get to talk to our suppliers, we get to attend events like this. We currently look after about £2 billion worth of that public sector spend figure you saw there on the earlier slides. That's around 70 framework agreements, and I'll talk a little bit more about framework agreements today. So about 70 of those agreements we look after, 32 local authorities we work with, and the 160 associate members. So you might be here today and you might be already on one of our frameworks. That's great. You know, we talk to suppliers all the time, and I'll explain a bit more about that today. You might be interested in working with us, so I'll talk about a pipeline of opportunities and how you go about working with us. You might have tried to bid for some of the work in the past and maybe been unsuccessful and don't know why. So I'm keen to talk about the process, talk about tips and things that can help you with that. So we'll run through a number of things today, but please come and talk to us on the stand. I'm here with some of my colleagues, and I'm sure we can answer most questions that you have. We touched on this a little bit already today, so just to give you some context, I'm quite new to public sector myself, about 3 years. It's actually really straightforward to understand where everyone sits, but initially it can seem like a bit of a minefield. So this is a good way of just explaining where things sit. So category A, we've heard from Rachel at Scottish Government, this is things across the entire public sector. So things might be desktop client services that every public sector organisation would use, classroom materials, desktop sort of stationary materials that everyone needs. So that tends to be category A. Category B is where the sector-specific organisations fit in. So Scotland Excel, as I mentioned, we're for the local authorities. So we're a local authority sector-specific organisation. We also have universities and colleges within the public organisations, and there's an organisation called Advanced Procurement for Universities and Colleges, do a very similar exercise to ourselves for the universities and colleges. And then we have an organisation, National Services Scotland, which look after the NHS as a sector specific. And all of those are here today, and there's some great information on the stands that you can find out more. At category C, this is at local authority level. So we'll work with the local authorities, and one of the things I'm really passionate about is efficiency. So This is efficiency for you as well. So if there's a common need across those local authorities, so an example might be wheelie bins that local authorities are needing, all the councils need something similar. We'll work with those local authorities to try and come up with a standard and also a common requirement, and then we can look at greater volumes. We then carry out the tender on their behalf. So instead of you needing to bid 32 times, you can bid once and get onto what we call a framework agreement. And I'll talk a bit more about that later. So the local authorities will have many local requirements as well that aren't relevant to all of the local authorities across Scotland. So they are classed as category C, and C1 is where maybe a number of local authorities, like we've got the Aberdeen Shared Service here today, Aberdeen City, Highland and Aberdeenshire Council, they might have a C1 requirement where they procure through a shared service for those three local authorities. So that's where we sit, and that's where the other organisations sit within the wider procurement in Scotland. So where to start? So you're here today, that's fantastic. So the Meet the Buyer events, I've been to a few of these. This is my first time speaking, so a little bit nerve-wracking, but I'm just trying to remember all the things that I've talked about on the stand over the years. As long as the national Meet the Buyer events, there's also a number of local Meet the Buyer events, and these for local authorities and also regions. Lots of training and things available. I'll talk a bit about quick quotes, but there's a really great session this afternoon all about quick quotes with Supply Development Programme and what that means. That's really worth attending. Public Contracts Scotland. I've got a slide on this we've touched upon already, which is fantastic. I think we'll just keep re-emphasising this throughout today. One of the things I often get asked is, do I need to register with Scotland Excel to be able to bid for your opportunities? What we try to make sure is we've not got lots of separate registrations and lots of things you have to remember. Public Contracts Scotland is the national advertising site. It's a very open and transparent process. Everything is on there. So my first bit of advice, if you're registered on Public Contracts Scotland, great. If you're not, search for the website, come and talk to the Scottish Government stand today and find out more about it. Get yourself registered on there. The supplier finder tool's really good. If you make sure your details are up to date on there, then buyers within local authorities and our members will search for suppliers on that tool. So things like alerts, register, I tick everything, just get as many alerts as possible, because then you'll know when opportunities are coming up. Linked to that is something called PCS Tender. These two systems are linked, and Scotland Excel use the PCS Tender for all our tender submissions. So when we advertise on the national advertising site, we'll provide a link to the tender submission service so you can put all your tender documents on there. On this Public Contracts Scotland, all future opportunities are advertised on there, along with past opportunities, so you can see full transparency, what types of things have been awarded by what organisations, what suppliers have been successful, and what types of things have been purchased by the local authorities. So register for both. It's definitely worth visiting our website, and we've put some QR codes in the presentation today and also on our stand. That gives you visibility of our pipeline, so have a look on there. You'll see what's coming up. We've developed that for today so you can see what's relevant to now, but also a full list of all the opportunities on our website and on Public Contracts Scotland. Mention quick quotes. So local authorities will use quick quotes on Public Contracts Scotland. So it's a function within Public Contracts Scotland which allows local authorities for lower threshold spend items to buy using quick quotes. And a function of that is that you're registered on PCS. And I'm sure my colleagues will explain it much better than me this afternoon, but definitely worth coming along to that session. I work with a number of the councils as an account manager, and they all use quick quotes. They all have slightly different standing orders, which is the level of spend they will use quick quotes for. but predominantly it tends to be for lower value, below £50,000 as a threshold. Greater than that, it then becomes a regulated procurement and a full tender exercise, which will be advertised on the Public Contracts Scotland. Contract registers are also a really good place to look. So you'll see on our website through the QR code, we have a list of all our tender opportunities and all our live contracts. Council websites will also have a contract register published on their website where you'll be able to see all the things that they're involved with and opportunities that are available. And then I'll talk a bit more about framework and contracts. Public Contracts Scotland, a couple of things that how we advertise on there. So prior information notices, this is where we engage with the market up to 12 months before our opportunity goes live. And this is really key to giving you as much information of what is coming up to tender for. We often at events like this, we've got an estates event this week in Glasgow. We also attend a number of local events with our category teams responsible for those contract areas. So it's really good to see those notices in advance. Contract notices, that's when the tender is live. So once you've had that prior information notice, the tender will then go live and we'll publish a contract notice on that site, which will give you formal notice of the opportunity, what's involved. Definitely recommend downloading the tender documents, having a read and preparing yourself for that tender before you then submit through the PCST site that we talked about. Once that tender concludes, we then publish the contract award notice, and that is giving the market visibility of the outcome of that tender exercise. So if you're successful, you will be an awarded supplier on that particular framework. And it's at that point we then start to engage in the contract mobilisation, which I'll talk about. Just an idea of the kind of things that we're looking after. So we have around 70 frameworks, around 2 billion of spend across the public sector for the local authorities. Our frameworks cover a number of industries, so construction, transport, environment, things like construction materials, trade materials, plumbing, heating, also things like bitumen, road materials, environmental frameworks that cover energy efficiency supply of solar panels, things like biomass, insulation are all covered. Things like new building local authority housing, we have frameworks in that construction portfolio. We also have corporate and education, so lots of classroom materials, janitorial, washroom solutions, things that we provide to all those local authorities. We have a huge social care, about 900 million of the spend is within our social care portfolio, things like care at home frameworks, sheltered accommodation under that social care. And a new category that's growing, we're working in partnership with the Digital Office for digital products and services. We've just employed a category manager to look after digital. On our social care frameworks, some of the alarm receiving centres moving from analogue to digital technologies for those receiving centres, we're in that space as well. Some QR codes there that are also on our stand will take you to those opportunities. So how you get on our frameworks. There's a similar slide just earlier on this. So there's different types of frameworks. There's some frameworks that are completely open, transparent through Public Contracts Scotland. Once the tender is closed, to be fair to all the suppliers that have been awarded, that framework is then closed for the life of that framework. That typically tends to be 3 to 4 years. Not all frameworks are closed. We have some flexible frameworks, particularly in our social care area. Suppliers can join them at any point in time. And something that was referred to earlier, dynamic purchasing systems. An example of that would be our recycle and residual waste. Suppliers can join that at any point in time throughout the life of the framework. Uh, as I said, Public Contracts Scotland, that's where all the opportunities are, and you can bid for those through the tender process. If you're successful, you'll get the contract award notice where you'll have visibility of that. And then another question I'm commonly asked, and I'm definitely new to this as well in terms of the terminology. So what I would say, framework agreement, this is an overarching agreement that if you're successful in being on that, then that means you're a vetted supplier, you've passed all the checks, and any of our members, so our local authorities or associate members, can then buy from you on that framework. The local authorities themselves will have buying teams, and they will buy off our frameworks. So as an account manager, I account manage the councils on behalf of Scotland Excel. So one of my roles is to sit down with the local authority, talk about what's live, what's coming up, understand what their requirements are, make sure they're involved with the development of those tenders, and then the local authorities will then use those tenders. We work in partnership together, so once we award those frameworks, we promote those frameworks throughout the life of the framework and encourage the local authorities to use them and to purchase from yourselves. So a good bit of advice is make sure you visit the local authorities, speak to the people there as well, show them what you can do, what products you have, what services you provide. And it's a good tick if you say you're on a framework and you've already done that. That saves every local authority doing their own tender exercise and you having to bid 32 times. You've done that work up front. You can then focus on selling the products, growing your business. So some of the benefits of working on a collaborative arrangement, a framework agreement, we ensure compliance. All the government priorities, compliance, regulation compliance, that's all taken care of by specialists in our team that cover the procurement. But it's also compliance for you. So we want to make sure it's open, it's fair, so you get full visibility of the opportunities, and there's no kind of smoke and mirrors, I would say. No incumbent person on an existing framework is advantaged. So if you're new to entering that particular framework, when it comes up for renewal, it's a level playing field. You get the opportunity to apply for that framework. Talked about efficiencies. My background in projects is I love efficiencies. I love doing things once and doing it right. There's lots of efficiencies for you as well. I've seen it on both sides. I've seen the amount of paperwork and how can we make that as streamlined as possible. So we're always open to more discussions on efficiency, both in that process, but also through the life of the contract. So experts in the field you'll have ideas, innovations that might make what we do better. We want to talk to you about that. We want to work with the local authorities. People often say, I'm concerned about going for a national framework because I don't want to service all of Scotland. That's quite an important point to make. We split the frameworks into lots. So if you just want to supply a particular local authority area, we have region Pacific lots there. We also have lots specific to certain things that can be provided. So our construction materials framework brought together 6 separate trade frameworks. There's separate lots for timber, there's separate lots for plumbing materials. You don't have to provide everything, it's just the overarching agreement. And you get access to our customer base. So we look after a large part of the local authority spend, so it's good to have access to all our members. You've got onto the framework, and I was speaking to someone just earlier, you've got onto the framework, but then it goes quiet. Well, what happens next? Well, this is key, and this is where we mobilise and do more and more with contract and supplier management. One of the challenges we face bringing the construction materials together, as an example, we brought 6 frameworks together. So we've got a lot of things on that framework, but it's really important that we now get out to those key suppliers, work with our local authorities, explain the benefits of using that framework, explain the catalogues, work together to make sure the products are visible and on there and the local authorities use them. and we're here to help. You know, my role is to do that, to promote that. We're also really keen on innovation, and I'll talk a bit about some of the challenges that we face, but there's lots of better ways of doing things. You'll hear in the news all the time, how can we make budgets go further? How can we save waste? And that's really important. So one of the things we're trying to do is work more with suppliers through a national savings team that we formed to go to the local authorities and give them opportunities to work with us, work with our key suppliers to bring those innovations. And just promoting the use of the frameworks. That's why we're here today. We want to talk to you. We want to hear your concerns. Want to hear what's working well, any opportunities that we can get involved with. So what's next? So some of the things that are really key to the development of our frameworks in future. We have big challenges with budgets across authorities. So we've been asked by the Chief Executive Group from the local authorities to look at what more we can do as a dedicated resource for our members. So we now have a national savings team, and I work very closely with that team to look for opportunities that we can take to local authorities. So we're working, for an example, with the fleet management group from all the local authorities. You know, in my simple mind, wouldn't it be great if we just had one specification for a vehicle? I know that's not necessarily going to be achievable, but moving towards that, how can we work together to create more standardization? How can we reduce waste? You know, certainly looking at some of our food delivery frameworks, logistics, carbon footprint, cost of fuel for those deliveries. Can we work together with local authorities to make that more efficient? And that's a great opportunity. And then, like I said, what's out there that we don't know about, certainly in the digital space, hence why we've moved more resource onto that particular category. So I think there's lots of opportunities there. There's also climate emergency regulations, Scottish Government. We have our own net zero strategy, looking at our current frameworks, but also recognising what more we can do for future frameworks. So things like carbon footprint, things like carbon miles. I have a background in energy. I'm really passionate about energy efficiency. So how can we bring that into more of our frameworks? Reducing some of the reliance on certain products where there's alternatives that might be more efficient. All opportunities out there. Lots covered. I've put my contact details on there together with Scotland Excel. So please feel free to reach out to me directly. I do like talking at these events and speaking to you. I really enjoy this role, so happy to facilitate. If I don't know the answer, there's some great people in the teams that I can speak to. And we've got some people on the stand here today that can give you more advice as well. So please feel free to contact us. Happy if there's any questions that anyone has. I'll try and answer, and if not, I'll certainly get the answer to you as soon as I can. So happy to take any questions.
The thing I just interested in and digitizations. Do you have any comprehensive policy of digitization of your assets and everything, records, and because there's a huge, massive public sector, and everything should be in different forms, and any digital comprehensive policy in place where we can be a part of any kind of supplies of services kind of things.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I think I caught most of that with the sound, but I think it's about having a comprehensive policy that everything's in the one place and kind of standardised. That is definitely something that through things like Public Contracts Scotland, I think that's really important. One place for all of the opportunities. Working with the other centres of expertise, which we do to make it a very transparent process. And then I suppose we all have kind of clear annual reports that we report on our procurements. So we're always open to suggestions on that. But I think using that one system is key, because everything is in the same format. The tender approach is the same. And people like the Supplier Development Programme are really key to how we just promote that and give it support to suppliers in how to do the tenders and how to submit on that system. Does that answer the question? Yeah. But come and talk to us on the stand if any more. That's
Yeah, sure.
more than happy.
Do you know, or do you think that in the near future having a net zero policy is going to be mandatory for Scottish Government procurement?
Yeah, I think it's already happening now. I think, that climate emergency regulation and the need to all contribute, and it's a key to contributing to that through what we buy. That's a really big driver. So all local authorities and an organisation I work with have a 5-10 year policy now to what they're going to do, and they're looking at, certainly the biggest impact we can have is the 2 billion spend. What are we spending that on, and where are the opportunities to standardise? Where are the opportunities to reduce carbon footprint? But it's also around community benefits, around what more can we do to get the best services in that local authority area. So all of those policies are considering working with economic development to grow those local supply chains. And one I really like is food miles, and there might be big opportunities to have more local produce, support that local supply chain. So all of those things are key opportunity for us, and I think we'll see more about that. I've come from kind of multinational companies, and they've been promoting that through their annual reports and sustainability reports. But I would say it feels more real so far in public sector. I feel there's less big statements and more just what can we do to chip away at this, and that's key. I don't think there is one big solution that will just fix it, but I think there's lots of things, and working with yourselves to bring those innovations and get those into the buying authorities is key.
The company that I work for predominantly operates within energy, oil and gas, where we have a very different contracting structure to a lot of the public contracts that I've seen. Is there any advice that you can give to businesses like ours as to how to approach the kind of the T's and C's, that kind of negotiation piece, so that we give ourselves essentially the best chance of being included or winning that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And I think through that initial information notice, that when we talk about a potential opportunity like that coming up, there's lots of opportunities to know that that's coming up, and there'll be events that we attend and supply development attend to give you advice on how to tender for those public contracts. So that's key to how to structure those submissions. But also what we do with our category teams is we go out to the market during that period and ask what the market wants, what the market's telling us. So engage with us. We'll engage with the local authorities who are asking for the specifications and make sure the two join together before the tender goes live.
Will there be any requirement for supplier? For example, in order to work with public bodies, you need to have net zero policies or those kind of things they need to do in order to apply for these tenders?
Yeah, it's certainly favourable. I would say, like everything, it's balanced. It's a balanced evaluation of a tender submission. So I would say it's always worth having that consideration of what we're trying to achieve nationally and internationally, I guess, on climate change. One of the things where we talk about getting onto a framework agreement, those framework agreements, we are a local authority ourselves. We work through Renfrewshire Council. All of our frameworks go to committee, where our elected members get to review and challenge our frameworks, and that is a top priority, making sure carbon and net zero is considered. And then the local authorities themselves, when they're buying, they're looking for how can they best achieve their own carbon policies. So it's giving you a distinct advantage, I would say, to consider that early.
Can I just add to that? Through the Supplier Development Programme, we've been working with Scottish Government and Net Zero Scotland. So there is actually a carbon reduction plan you can start to create for your businesses. So you can start to think about how you're going to reach the targets that have been set out by the Scottish Government. And we've been working with Zero Waste Scotland in particular about how you can achieve that. So if that's something that's of interest, please come along to their stand today or come along to the STB stand and we can talk to you about that.